Hello, everyone. Well, a joy to have you with me. This is the Peak District. No, of course it isn't. It's Switzerland. This is the Peak District. And tonight we are going to be talking about how a demonstration of no, it's not a new approach, rather a fairly well-tried approach that the Swiss have already had in place for a very long time, can pretty rapidly deploy much better public transport in this area. We dive into what timetable actually is, what Taktfahrplan actually is, and perhaps go into the details of how it might be applied across the wider UK, as well as flicking through the proposals here to see if we think they are any good. As ever, if you want to arm yourself with the tools to make transport better, then joining the Patreon for £5 a month is a great place to start, giving you the free audiobook of How the Rails Will Fix the Future, as well as access to the weekly bonus episode with the full back catalogue, adding a big chunk to the Rail Natter canon. Go to patreon.com/GarthDennis to subscribe. Without further ado, everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the Intercity 225 fades away, we start in June 2025, which is when Hope Valley Climate Action, who've been campaigning for a fairly long time on this, initiated the process of getting a report written, talking about Switzerland in the Peak District, a mini Switzerland, if you like, and how to deploy this, how it would make things better. And within these proposals, there were three key themes for what they wanted to see for mini Switzerland within the Hope Valley. I've just realised I've not really told anyone where the Hope Valley is. We'll get there when it gets to the port, but it's kind of nestled in closer to Sheffield, between Sheffield and Manchester. It's kind of on the Sheffield side. It's the main intercity connection between Manchester and Sheffield. We'll get to that in the bonus, but more on that later. The three things that Hope Valley Climate Action were crucially kind of proposing was that there would be the mini Switzerland would provide clock face hourly services, seamless connections across modes, and journeys with only a single ticket. So, that's all good stuff. So, some report writing time. And jump forward to February 2026, and we have this, Mini Switzerland in the Peak District, a plan for public transport innovation and growth. So that was published in February 2026 by a few partners. And we're going to do a bit of a page turn on that one later, but not a full page turn. We're going to flick through it to pick out a few key points, because we've got a few other things we want to talk about tonight. So, February 2026, this gets published. April 2026, and government says yes, because EMCA, via the Mayor Clare, EMCA being the East Midlands Combined County Authority, so it's kind of a rural regional rather than a mayoral urban combined authority, secures £6 million for Mini Switzerland. So the pilot, or rather the demonstrator, is a go-go. So before we get into the plans, we need to talk about timetables. Yes, timetables, because, here is one of them. If I should say, this is actually the first official National Rail timetable, which was only published in 1974. That's right, the first British National Railway timetable, only published in 1974. That was about a decade after the demise of the Bradshaws. I have a Bradshaws behind me somewhere on a pile. Anyway, so the timetable, it is the three-way interface between track, train, and the passenger. It's kind of the key feature of the service offered to the potential travelling public by the railways, or by buses, or by both. And the kind of the fact that this, that fundamental nature of the timetable is kind of key in this Switzerland, kind of the Swiss model that we're going to be talking about tonight. All the other stuff, like, the design of the vehicles, what stations are like, all the stuff, price even, are all significant, but without a timetable, you're kind of allowing a passenger to actually have a temporal interface that works with public transport, then it doesn't work. They're not going to take the train. They're not going to take the bus. It's kind of, that's a really key point, but it is one that has been, with our privatised railway, and even with the railway today, it is a thing that you'd think is obvious, but it has absolutely been neglected over the years, over and over and over, as we've seen our timetable become increasingly complex, nebulous, and self-serving. So, I'm doing some quoting here, or kind of referencing this, and I'll refer to the paper in a second. But so bear with me a second. But here is the timetable as it is today. The National Rail timetable runs through tables 1 through 220 here. So the first one is London, Barking, Upminster, Basildon, Grays, Tilbury, Southend Central, and Shoeburyness, all the way to table 220, which is London to Scotland, Calais sleeper services. So every timetable offered by public transport is planned in one of kind of these 3 ways, if you like. The first is that each element of the service can be organised individually to match the planner's judgment of specified market demands and in accordance with any resource or operational constraints. Number 2 is a repeating pattern that provides in broad terms the demand that can be determined and strictly maintained throughout the operating day. And 3, a pattern that can simply be a starting point with the detail varied as may be required. So kind of 3 approaches, if you like, demand-based scheduling. The second is pattern-based scheduling. And the third is start with the pattern and then vary the detail as required. So kind of almost a bit of a hybrid of the 2. It's kind of vital that the design of the timetable work for any given set of circumstances. So, traditionally, and is largely the case today, timetables were kind of produced on a kind of a extremely excruciating train-by-train basis, now augmented substantially by modelling. But the idea of having a patterned service, sort of a clock-face service, is almost as old as the railways themselves, and indeed going back potentially couple of thousand years, maybe even slightly before that. So yeah, absolutely follows the provision of railway histories and railways throughout time. It's worth saying that some of the stuff that I'm going to go through here, I've drawn a lot in this section from Jonathan Tyler's 2003 paper on the paper is titled "The Philosophy and Practice of Taktfahrplan: A Case Study of the East Coast Main Line." It's from Leeds ITS. Well worth a read. You can go and find that quite easily. So there's a lot of really good stuff in there about the relationship between takt and timetable. Anyway, so takt. Wir fahren mit Takt hier, Ihre SBB. So the Swiss model. Why is the Swiss model different to sort of demand-based scheduling? So there are a few factors here. The development of a system-wide coordinated timetable based on clear rules, reputation, and consistency was absolutely sort of pioneered by the absolutely visionary Swiss Federal Railways in the late 1970s. They first implemented it in 1982, and they called it Taktfahrplan, which literally means rhythm journey plan, but that's not actually what the translation is. That phrase is very much established now in German. So, Taktfahrplan, or as I like to call it, the rhythmic timetable. That is what Taktfahrplan is. In other words, if you move without rhythm, you won't catch the worm. Yeah, thank you, Christopher. Yeah, no, Taktfahrplan. Yeah, I can't put the music in because it'd be anything with a music video. It's just like a catastrophic YouTube strike off the bat. So anyway, Taktplan. Wir fahren mit Takt, which is we travel with rhythm, which is why I quite like that SBB poster, which kind of launched TFP off the bat. So fundamentally, what is this achieving? What does this rhythm get you? Well, yes, broadly it is the idea that you can seamlessly link across transport modes, not just in integrated tickets and interchanges, but in the literal timing of the arrival and departure of services, meaning the biggest city and the smallest town are served in an integrated, logical pattern that's naturally usable for humans. On the Wikipedia page, there's a really nice GIF showing, sort of in a very simplified form, the little vehicles kind of moving in and out of the hubs. So that's fine. That's kind of broadly what it is. Oh, by the way, spot the deliberate mistake here. Some of this is Swiss, some of this is not. You'll see the trains are very much Deutsche Bahn, not SBB. Anyway, so there are 6 elements highlighted by that paper, by Tyler's paper, which specifically draw out what I think very neatly is Taktfahrplan. So you could call it network-based scheduling over and above line-based or demand-responsive scheduling. And these are the following. So number 1, logical and coherent timetable across a network. And number 2, articulates a well-defined hierarchy of services. Number 3, connectivity between services is optimized. Number 4 is that systematic planning and regularity make the best use of capacity. Number 5 is that you have a repeating pattern that is simple to memorize and to market. And number 6 is that services in one direction mirror those in the reverse direction. That last one seems trite, but it's absolutely critical. So, to simplify that, put more simply, you get a clock face timetable, you have a hierarchy of services, optimized connectivity, you make the best use of capacity, it has a simple pattern, and directional services are mirrored. That is Taktfahrplan, really. Those 6 points are key. And we really need to talk about system capability, kind of the combination of journey time and capacity, because Taktfahrplan gives us the ability to deploy the capability of the railway to its fullest potential. So, a railway, seen here from the front of what must be a 170 whizzing up over on its way up the hill towards Slough. Yeah, railway is a system comprising track, trains, control mechanisms. The number of trains that you can squeeze onto it, very much determined by the relationship between these features, between the infrastructure, the number of tracks, the distance between signals, or indeed the type of signaling system, railway train control system that you have, the ability of the vehicles to accelerate and brake, their performance, electrification obviously then helps with that. The vehicles themselves have a certain number of seats in them, as well as their ability to call at certain stations. All of these things interrelate. The reliability and the robustness of the system as well. All of these things, how you maintain it, how you plan in maintenance time, all of these things interrelate to give you the capability, the journey time between nodes and the capacity of the interconnectors between nodes. So, what is the way that you maximize that capacity? What is the way that you maximize that capability? Look, we stopped at a signal. You run the same type of trains at the same speeds, as close together as you reasonably can do. But in practice, as we know, that kind of generally you'll only see that on on dedicated freight lines, generally kind of shorter industrial lines rather than the longer ones, and urban metros, urban high capacity metro or suburban rail services. So, what does that actually look like in practice? So some of you might recognize these. On multi-purpose, multi-route railways, invariably you have trade-offs. So you might well have paths for trains that go non-stop, but it's rare that trains make use of these, particularly if you've got intermediate stations. So, you've got the balance of, commercial and engineering capabilities and requirements of every kind of type of service, acceleration curves, running speed, stopping patterns. Junction movements, interrelationships of all of the above. And on the other side, you've got the need to kind of maximize revenue, to kind of get the best return on that fixed cost of infrastructure. In the case of, so you might have, some of you might recognize some of these cars. They haven't been out since 2018, I think. So medium distance regional services, local urban and rural services, rail freight, long distance regional services, long distance high speed services. All of these get in each other's way in different ways. They're not all nice and compatible with each other. And this is further complicated when you don't necessarily have a key purpose or objective function, if you like, as Taylor puts it, on how success should be measured, what the optimum arrangement actually is. Without a directive from on high, this is made even more complex. So let's take some examples just for those who aren't familiar with how this works. So just taking like local services versus long distance service. You've got a local stopping service versus a non-stop service, and you can see how the non-stop service calls at station A, station E, but the stopping services stops at all of stations A, B, C, D, and E, and you can see that you fitting them together. Not only are you leaving huge big gaps, these big gaps here, look, big gaps in the timetable here, the big wasted space, but also you've got these nasty clusters. So you've got from a kind of a passenger clarity perspective, it's not really very clear. It's not ideal for a passenger to be dealing with nothing, and then a sudden interrelationship between the two. That's messy. So how do you optimize this? Well, you've split the services out, right? So you've got hence HS2 folks. So you've got the long distance high speed services that have a bit more space between them because they travel faster, and you've got the slightly slower, rural services that you can, or urban services that you can fit more closely together, despite their irregular stopping pattern. You can fit loads of them running through, and that's kind of what an urban high density service looks like. Some would argue that since it's necessary to fit the offer to the needs of certain time-sensitive markets or groups of customers, I'm quoting again, absolute regularity may impose unacceptable rigidity and, at worst, a loss of business. Yeah, some people might argue that. There's a nice page in the report, actually, that I want to pick out. There's a few things that get picked out, the kind of factors in defining the behavior of a timetable and the success of a timetable. The first is that, public transport will, by definition, be unsuitable for some travelers with very time-specific needs. So that's this bit. Preferred and offered timings are most unlikely to coincide for everyone. Okay, fine. The second is kind of a counter-argument to this, is that a standard pattern with high connectivity may create such a sense of the convenience of moving about an area by rail and by public transport collectively that most travellers are content to adjust their lives to what is offered. Oh. Hello. I'm back. Don't know what happened there. Thank you, the internet. Sorry, OBS deciding it was going to commit harikari. I'm back. That's fine. James will fix it in the edit. Hello, everyone. Oh, that was scary. Right, anyway, okay, so there is one factor in this that I want to pull out, though, which is nice, which is this here. Some railway this is a footnote, here. Some railway managers in Britain have been highly successful in maximising the use of rolling stock by tweaking timetables, and each step will have been legitimised by net revenue benefits. However, incremental progression toward a disjointed timetable, albeit unintended, may have had damaging, intangible effects on public perception, and it is not certain that the sum of separate decisions over time yields the most efficient outcome. Very nice indeed. This is a key point, right? And I also see me tweeting a very similar thing, because in King's Cross at about 6:30 you have the 1827, the 1830 and 1835 departures northwards from King's Cross. Some might argue this is an efficient use of capacity, and it sure might look that way for timetable planners, but it's a nightmare for station and train staff and passengers, even seasoned ones. Now, what's funny is that was 2022. There we are, 2022. What year is it now? It's 2025, and the condition is now that there are 5 trains that depart in quick succession within the space of 15 minutes at that point, because the 2025 timetable is absolutely bonkers on the East Coast Main Line. It is a work of art. Do not get me wrong. It's spectacular what it has achieved. Nothing short of a miracle what it has achieved. But I would argue that it is achieving a lot while sacrificing a lot at the same time, not least intermediate bloody passenger services. So, here is Britain, and here is kind of what the level of usage on our railway looks like, with the very obvious cores, a few kind of fairly sizable hubs, and you say it's 2025 and 2026. Good point, it is 2026. That was 2026, although the 2025, it was a 2025 timetable released in December 25, yeah, cheeky. Here's Britain. Here's where all the kind of the usage is, and generally the way that our railway works when we're deciding how to upgrade it, improve it, add capacity, is that we come up with all sorts of wild justifications for an intervention or multiple interventions. Those then lead the timetable. Almost always that is what happens. We have come up with a bunch of interventions, and those lead the timetable. Actually, Transpennine Route Upgrade, which gets mentioned in the news, has in some places departed a bit from this. Now, if you think about all these things, the clock face timetable, the hierarchy of services, optimized connectivity, making best use of capacity, you see that actually you end up in a situation where, rather than the interventions defining the timetable, what you do is you start with the timetable, and that then leads your interventions. So actually you're going, we need the timetable to do this, and therefore the infrastructure must do this. Now, another very useful blog that I've cribbed from is mediarail.wordpress.com. There's about Deutschland Takt. The great challenges of the clock face timetable is a kind of 2 articles, very worth reading. This graphic actually comes from Deutsche Bahn, talking about how they're going to implement it. And you can see that when it comes to interventions, you've got various hubs, which are a key part of delivering TFP. You can see you've got 65 minutes here, 32 minutes, 92 minutes, 35 minutes. Now, those aren't helpful for a regular rhythm. You need to normalize those journey times. So normalizing it to 60 minutes, so 5-minute journey time improvement, there's your intervention. 30 minutes, well, okay, 2-minute journey time improvement. Okay, there's your intervention. 92 minutes to 90 minutes, 35 minutes to 30 minutes. You start seeing this is how you get to the point where you're changing the infrastructure, modifying the infrastructure to match a timetable. Now, ultimately, isn't a timetable the thing that passengers have to live with to make use of for their lives? So maybe our infrastructure should match the timetable, not the other way around. It makes sense that the timetable should lead, not follow, the infrastructure. We should be building our railway network and indeed a public transport system that maps onto what humans in the area need to move around, not that they should have to put up with the public transport system as they find it. See also every single rail natter where I talk about, where I grow a network from first principles. This is exactly what we like to do. So I know that people are asking. The danger with Swiss timetable model is that it disincentivizes further journey time reductions unless you can reduce it by around 30 minutes. That's true. That is true. But part of me is like, well, to a point, well, that's where you have high speed to make the big leaps, but actually journey time is less important than improving. If you've got the clock face, I would argue that the journey time improvements of a minute or two beyond that are less important than having the high capacity and the frequency and the predictable timetable, the ability to have a repetitive railway that runs more cost effectively, and therefore you can maximize how many trains you're running and how many seats you're getting in front of passengers. So that BHF there, Bahnhof, as in railway station, yes. Or specifically, it is railway station very much. Right, so, look, HS2, have a look at HS2. You start seeing that you can, you have a situation where you have a similar thing going on here, right? It's a similar situation of, you have a system that you could run, the intercity would be optimized. Fundamentally, you have the hub arrangement. So, HS2 provides those hubs. You need hub and spoke. And so that is absolutely the value. You distributed hub and spoke, and so it requires more than one hub, and it suits devolution well. So one of the things that HS2 delivered was that it stopped Britain from just having the one hub that is London. It created a bunch of other hubs around the rest of the region as well. So that's kind of a key point. Is that Takt needs distributed hub and spoke to work. So you have the hub. And then from each of these hubs, you then have the spokes going out that then provide your drumbeat. So each city is the hub, and then you plan the timetable around the drumbeat of the intercity services. So it works on a national basis. But I just go, okay, what about scale? What about scale? How does this actually work in practice when it comes to the UK? So, it's all very well going, well, here's a nice simplified diagram, but what about the real world? Because obviously it's much more complex than that. There's a lot more going on. This is actually, let's have a look at this. This looks suspiciously like it is Austria rather than Switzerland, but Austria has a nominal tact in place on its kind of core routes. But again, you can start seeing the complexity involved here for what is a fairly straightforward network. Well, let's widen that out and look at the scale of Switzerland, or the size of Switzerland versus the UK, and you start seeing, Switzerland is about the size of of not even the whole north, but just like the Transpennine North bit, like TFN's sort of remit. Well, not even that, actually. Basically, just it's the size of like Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, not quite as far as the northeast, and not as down as far as the West Midlands. So you sort of see the size we're talking about here. Does that mean that it can't be rolled out? It absolutely does not mean that, no, because it is possible to roll out TACT across the whole of the UK, across the whole country. It has been repeatedly modelled and documented. Crucially, though, the key point here is that frequency is freedom. Like if you're developing a system that aims for high frequencies of a repeatable timetable, a repeatable pattern, then that will maximize usage. So let's have a look at the document, shall we? Let me briefly get my big face up. So before we dive into that, let's just very quickly go. Yeah, okay. Any questions coming through just now? I'll pull up most of the questions at the end, but if you do have any questions, don't forget to my name so that it appears. Switzerland Powerhouse Rail says ZB Zoe. Yeah, exactly. The Northern Central Belt. Yeah, quite. Swiss Powerhouse Railways. Yeah, there we go. Okay, fine, good. Let's have a look at this document. So, Mini Switzerland in the Peak District. Let's have a look. So there's a nice introduction. It's a nice document. It's got a nice optimistic feel to it. I like it. And we're going to kind of flick through. Warning, I might flick a few pages quickly. If you're photosensitive, beware of that. We'll flick through it. So, the case for change in rural Britain. We don't need to go. We understand that the main problem, of course, is that bus services have just been obliterated. Bus deregulation is the kind of the root cause of that. Generally, it's been a complete disaster. Go back to our bus, the man who destroyed Britain's buses episode, if you want to understand what that was all about. So, not necessarily a reflection of rural life itself. Actually, rural communities benefit from a lot of modern things like broadband. Actually, enable a fairly vibrant rural economy, albeit one that does need to focus around villages rather than massively individually dispersed houses. But it's good stuff. So fine. It's lots of the challenges. The result of rural areas is that you have a network that's too thin to be useful, too unreliable to trust, too disconnected to attract new riders, and too underused to be financially sustainable. I benefit from living in quite rural places, kind of semi-urban, big town type places, and then cities. And so I've kind of experienced all of them. And yeah, it's absolutely the case that the bus being unreliable out of Talabont towards Aberystwyth was irritating at best and life impacting several times. I used to hitchhike quite regularly, but that's not something that everyone can do. And so the key point here is that, what's missing is a national demonstrator, and they're saying Switzerland, the Peak District, will be that demonstrator. Fantastic. So the concept. What is the concept? Well, we've talked about all this stuff. This stuff should be familiar, So clock face timetable, hourly services, seamless connections between buses and trains, a network that's easy to understand. So this gets into this page is getting into our sort of integrated transport point, back to our Dr. Kevin Tennant point about the permanence of the permanent way, but the importance of integration across modes. Ideally, we would just see an area that has buses and trains that are branded the same or to be a shared identity. Having EMCA shared identity would be nice, but you could do it you could do it for just the Hope Valley, and that could be fine. But absolutely should be shared identity. We'll get to that towards the end of the kind of the elephant in the room of this one. So simple joined up ticketing, quality and reliability is the core offer, which they're saying here. You need to minimize cancellations, keep to time, clean, comfortable vehicles, and safe, well-maintained interchange points. So all that's good stuff. Clear, comprehensive information, no-brainer. Nobody left off the map. So a coherent network ensures that every settlement of any size, schools, workplaces, and all main visitor attractions have at least an hourly service. Boom. Love it. That's good stuff. That is just, it's not, well, go to, do 1,000 days and spend £1 million on a consultant to develop an enormous volume of complexity on just do an hour everywhere. Just develop a timetable that delivers an hour everywhere, build the infrastructure to match. Absolutely. Comprehensive marketing of bus services, better value through higher ridership. Sure. A demonstrator, not just a pilot. Okay. A pilot test one, intervention and isolation. No, this is a demonstrator of the concept is what they want here. So fair enough. Driving behavior change. Great. And then they go, okay, well, why the Hope Valley? Okay. Trainmore is saying plenty of rural areas could be much less car dependent if the towns and villages were better connected to each other. Absolutely. So why the Hope Valley? It's not an arbitrary location for a mini Switzerland demonstrator. It's a rural corridor between two major cities. Yes, more on that on tonight's bonus. It has high car-free populations with limited access to countryside. So 1 in 3 households in Sheffield and Manchester have no access to a car. So that means that the Peak District is geographically close but distant in practice. So it means only people who can drive can get into this rural area, this pretty beautiful part of the country. It's a busy national park under pressure. Yeah, this is going to be a useful episode, really, as a model for what we can do in other parts of the country as well. The Lake District is kind of a classic example, I would say. Strong foundations already in place. Basically, the fact that it has an hourly stopping train service, calling it 5 local stations, is the key. That's the key thing, that they don't have to alter the railway for this one. Representative challenge that mirror national issues. So it kind of usefully covers a few things here. Narrow roads, tight junctions, limited space for buses at train stations and village centres, because we got rid of all the blinking sidings and sold it off for development, if not burrowing under a car park. Historic layouts that complicate bus turning and waiting. Station locations remote from village centres. Absolutely constrained budgets and a high proportion of tendered bus services. I'm glad they mentioned the last one. Tendered bus services, yes. And the last one is that there's an engaged community passionate about sustainable transport. Yes, because HVCA, Hope Valley Climate Action, we referred to earlier, are they are the promoters of this concept, and they've been pushing it very hard. And it's grassroots development, supported with by national transport experts, Thomas Abelman, Nigel Hutton, John Bickerton, and Matt Harrison, Angela Cohen, Charlie Nichols, and many others who are named at the end. Actually, there's a few familiar names in the heap for this one. So, designing the Hope Valley Network, this bit we'll flick through, but it gives an idea of what you have to put into it. So, the fixed, reliable foundation is the rail spine, absolutely. So this, in a way, is giving you your mini hubs, because hub and spoke doesn't mean one hub, lots of spokes. It means that you have hub, sub-hubs, sub-sub-hubs, sub-sub-sub-hubs, and the interrelationship accordingly, which gives you your hierarchy, and that hierarchy is then very useful for modeling what type of provision to provide for each type of connector. So the little graph at the bottom there shows you usage figures for Hope Valley stations year on year, and line go up. They are very popular services. This is serious growth, major growth. And so there is a Hope Valley bus network. It's a bit all over the place. Bus services cover much of the Hope Valley. The services are infrequent and unpredictable. They're not timed to meet trains, so connections are often more than 30 minutes, considerably longer than the on-bus element of their journey. Evening and Sunday bus services are confined to the main 272 route and to the 62 route. So yeah, not great. So there's a few, so there's various things sort of pointing out about frequencies and bus services in the Hope Valley are primarily used by those with no option and frequently are very lightly loaded. Instead of treating them as purely a lifeline, it would be better to treat them as a viable public transport service that attracts fare payers in large numbers and supports the local economy. Okay. The proposed network has been designed to achieve these objectives. It's not sacrificing them being a lifeline, by the way. It's just going, well, how do we make this a public transport system that services everyone's needs? So there we go. So you've got various bits of kind of proposals. So fast travel between villages, reliable backbone for households without cars, and so on and so on. So a rural car with modest demand can justify high frequency when it sits inside an integrated network rather than operating in isolation. That's a really key point. Absolutely. So this is available for reading. The link actually in the description for downloading this report, by the way, everybody. So as you go through, it starts talking about what those multimodal journeys can look like with rural networks designed in Switzerland across much of mainland Europe. Hourly is the base layer, so you have to have an hourly core, an hourly spine, an hourly backbone. So this is kind of an illustration of the concept and like how that travel looks. So it's currently the status quo is like no connection or long waits that you can see down here. I won't zoom in because it'll break it, but you can sort of see. You can zoom in on the report yourselves. You sort of see these red bits are that's not going to there are no connections, gutted, versus the mini Switzerland logic of here are the trains and then there are connections with brief walks, brief waits at different times of day as well. So showing what happens at different types of day. So this is going to say Manchester Piccadilly and Bradwell via Hope Station is the example here. So there's different. Each of these is the hubs. The Bamford Edale stations. Hope as a mini hub for Bradwell in the south, and this is talking about then the clock face network that behaves as one system. So these are bandwidth diagrams. These are showing the services that when they currently run and when they will need to run. So this is saying this is the time at the bottom, and the green bits are this service will need to run at these times. So there you go. So it's saying buses need to work better as part of the overall system rather than being bare bones. Visitor mobility. So okay, lots of familiar challenges, and how do you deal with those? So it has to work all year round. This matters nationally, of course. And then ticketing and fares. How's this going to be? It's going to be a single ticket. Single ticket, greatly simplifying the choice, removing that complexity. So there's already a concept that GWR have been using called Rail Link. It's been revived because it's an old BR identity, in fact, for use on certain dedicated bus connections to rail. That brand could be used for an entire network or Don't do that and just integrate the buses into the transport system and stop thinking about trains and buses as separate things. So delivering reliability. So there's a little bit in here, not much. There's not much detail in that bit. Data monitoring, learning. Okay, fine. There's, what data should be collected to validate this demonstrator, and then the delivery of it, how it's going to work. And the costs, there's a bit of cost involved, not a huge amount. There's some capex involved in some limited expenditure on some new buildings, just a little bit of road widening, some expansion of parking, bits and pieces. So that saying Hope Station would be nice if you did some heavier investment, but the project can proceed in advance of any improvement package at the station. So yes, it's assuming that if some upgrades at the station happen, they can be funded as separate capital projects. Okay, fine. And then some other sort of recurring costs. It prioritizes network connectivity over standalone vehicle efficiency. Yes, so having the minimum number of buses to deliver the service is not the priority over providing the best overall connectivity, a thing the railway has forgotten about completely. Buses are timed to meet trains and wait at interchange points. While this reduces vehicle utilization when viewed in isolation, it significantly improves end-to-end journey efficiency for passengers and increases overall network usage and revenue. The shift from vehicle efficiency to multimodal system efficiency is a core reason for Switzerland having the highest rate of public transport use in Europe. This is an entirely new way of working for UK transport and a key feature of Mini Switzerland. I really want to pick that paragraph out. That's key. Stop thinking about stuff in very narrow commercial terms and start thinking bigger, which you can only do, of course, if you're not a bus company with only your own buses as the thing that you care about, and the bottom line is the only thing you care about. So there's a lot of stuff, it's saying it's not a huge amount of capital required, basically. What's the timeline? Well, in this, they say they want to be starting to roll out Easter 27, if not sort of summer 27. So, okay, fine. The conclusions. Well, it just says, this would be nice, wouldn't it? So there we go. Complementary developments. So AFA at Hope Station, absolutely, constructing the bus hub. Going for alternative fueled vehicles for the routes 63 and 64, fine. Let's see whether that actually happens. They're extending the integration between other types of transport. So I think it's saying do some bike hire and do some e-bike kind of hire stuff and so on and so on. And then joint marketing. And then all these supporters who are on screen. Very small, but there are a few friendly faces in here. Who am I going to pick out? I know Chris Denham is in here, but Leo Murray's in here. Hello, Leo. Nice to see you in there. If you're listening, a delight. Who's that? Oh, Lucy Pryor's in here as well. Ah, fab. Who else is getting involved? Yeah, look, that's great. It's a nice one there. Lovely job. So, that's Mini Switzerland. It's exciting. It's extremely exciting, in fact. I'm pleased that these that we're in a situation where this is not only a work through plan, but it has been funded by government to happen. Yeah, so I think it's a good report. I haven't actually rated it, but maybe we'll do the rating in the bonus episode. But I suppose it's a case. It's not really a rateable thing because I think it's very good. I don't think there are any particular shortcomings in it. It dances around a few political things. It has to, bus ownership, because it has to, but because it knows who its target audience is. But no, it's great. I think it's brilliant. More excitedly, I'm very pleased that it's happening. Key question, though, is will it work? Well, that's the question, isn't it? Let's see what Thomas Abelman, who's kind of the founder of Freewheeling, which is kind of a transporty type, think tanky type thing, a bit like E2M, I suppose, and PRE before it. Thomas Abelman says it doesn't require large-scale infrastructure investment. There's absolutely no reason why this can't be done quickly in all rural areas. Actually, specifically, he says he's kind of a transport expert and creator of this concept. He said it was fantastic the project to receive government backing, and he said he'd be pushing for longer-term funding settlement for it. One of the wonderful things about this, it doesn't require large-scale infrastructure investment, but there is some investment because it needs to be good. You need good bus stops, better pedestrian access between stations to bus stops, new signal crossings, plus much better and more buses. There's absolutely no reason why this can't be done quickly, and once it's proved in the Hope Valley, there's no reason why it can't be done in all rural areas, he said. So, the key thing that it needs, though, is the existing hourly rail spine. Without this, it wouldn't work. So that means that every rural area in Britain requires an hourly rail spine. Hourly. 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 That's crucial. I just wanted to shout out the Foundation for Integrated Transport and the Hope Valley Climate Action. FIT funded Hope Valley Climate Action, or jointly with Hope Valley Climate Action, funded the report you just saw, which has ended up with change happening. So it just shows this can happen. If you pitch it right, this sort of thing can actually get moving. Government will get behind it. So, if you're interested in that sort of thing, well, fancy being part of a community that cares about this stuff at scale and has the ability to get in with policymakers. Hello, everybody. I'm talking about us. Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. The elephant in the room, though, because there is one elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is, of course, buses. But it's how many 4 or 5 bus companies in the area, all with their own interest in little more than the bottom line. What we need to do with these is consolidate them into a single organization. Possibly MCA have their own bus, or whatever it is. Franchising is one step, but it's not the end of it. I'd much prefer whatever municipalization is, but for rural areas. It'd be nice for there to be a kind of a unified bus operator. But in any case, this is an elephant in the room because they all intend to draw profit. They all compete with each other. They don't have much interest in having the extra vehicles that they don't need and paying the drivers to sit in them to integrate with public transport better. So, yeah, this is the challenge, folks. Getting this to work and getting your way around this is the challenge. But come summer 2027, this should be moving. That should be happening, and I look forward to going and seeing it in action. Do I think it'll work? Yeah, I do think it'll work because it's really quite a small-scale demonstrator. We're not talking about an enormous region. It's localized. But absolutely, if you replicate this in other rural areas of a similar size, and then start tying them into larger, for example, MCA or larger regional plans connected to the nearest hubs of, in this case, Manchester and Sheffield, then all of a sudden you start building up a national picture. Now that would be quite something. Ultimately, what you get is an ability to access a stunning part of the world. If anyone hasn't been to the Hope Valley, I'd recommend it. It is stunning. You can do it by bike, by bus, by train. Actually, but train and bike are probably the best combo for seeing the Hope Valley if you're not in your car. But it's absolutely stunning. Well, recommend going down to Hope. Fascinating. Very crowded, enormous car parks. Makes you think. Talking of the Hope Valley, though, because... by the way, I should say, any questions, get them queued up because we'll cover them after a bit of news. Tonight's bonus, though, is going to be the Hope Valley should be a mainline. We're going to be getting to that. It's interesting to think, how will that screw up the mini Switzerland? Well, it shouldn't do, should it? But the Hope Valley should be a mainline, and we'll have a look at why it isn't one, what being a mainline actually entails, and what that would physically look like in its relationship with the two major cities it connects, because it is connecting up 2 of Britain's largest cities in Manchester and Sheffield. So the Hope Valley line should be a main line, £5 above tier. You get that tonight, 9:30. I look forward to seeing you there. Now, some news. A few bits and pieces of news to pick up on. First of these, New Civil Engineer picking up on the fact that the latest HS2 land disposal is expected to begin this year. Rail Minister Peter Hendy stated how the delivery agent is currently developing a disposal programme for the former Phase 2B eastern leg of HS2. That's the Yorkshire leg. Not gone yet, basically, so it could be saved. Does Hendy have any intention of saving it? The programme will be delivered over several years to avoid disrupting local property markets, take into account the impact on local communities and ensure value for money can be achieved for taxpayers. So that's a no then. Yeah, a reminder how much money has been spent on... I won't go into the details, but it's well worth picking up the New Civil Engineer article there and having a look at how much money has been spent on property purchase and then will be wasted on disposals on a route that is, frankly, quite useful and should be retained. Not good. Private delivery models for delivering, on the theme of that, I should say, HS2, some discussions often come up to, well, why is it not being delivered privately? Well, because private delivery models for infrastructure, certainly for railway infrastructure and for stations on an existing railway corridor, don't necessarily work very well. Involving private enterprise agents or private equity in the delivery of a railway station sometimes doesn't go so well. That's what the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Leeds City Council and indeed the DFT have found out in the delivery of White Rose Station, as the delivery date for the station continues to be far from clear. 4 years after work started and 2 years after everything ground to a halt, absolutely no clarity on when the station will be finished or if it ever actually will be. In theory, Cottingham Station further north will close and this will open, but that, put the problems with that to one side. That what that actually means for the overall plan, local transport plans in the area. Not sure. Yeah, May 2025, it emerged the station was 70% built, but the budget had been spent. And obviously, details of the dealings with the private equity firm remain confidential. But it turns out that all the money being put in by the public sector for this station to benefit the private equity firm who owns the shopping centre next to it is all at risk anyway, because the financial position of that of Spencer Group, who are the contractors, and the private equity firm are at risk without a settlement agreement in place, i.e. without further money. So this then begs the question, maybe we should have just delivered it ourselves and not bothered with them. And maybe that would have helped us to think clearly about whether the station was a necessary station or not. Because at the moment, the way it relates to the actual kind of public, the towns and the settlements around, rather than the shopping centre, are leave a little to be desired, frankly. However, it's not all doom and gloom. TRU mentioned transparent route upgrade a little bit earlier when I was referring to situations where we are developing infrastructure based around a timetable, which has happened in a few spots along TRU. TRU as a major scheme has kind of looked at a timetable and delivered infrastructure to fit that. And here you can see Slowett and Marsden stations here with their extra third track. Well, actually, Marsden already has a third track, but basically it's providing a consistent third track right the way through. Standage to Huddersfield, transparent route upgrade proposals in consultation. They are in consultation now. I should say that the details for this are key, so I should read them. The consultation for Standage to Gleddalt enhancement scheme is now live. It closes on the 24th of April, so you've got a little bit of time left. There were some in-personal consultation events, but there is one more third and final session on Saturday the 18th of April between 10 and 1 at Marsden Mechanics on Peel Street in Huddersfield. So you can go and have your say on what you think. Have a look at the plans. To be honest, what's up in the consultation room isn't that detailed. But you get to go and have your say and share your thoughts. I quite like the sort of common standardized station design for these AFAs between the two. Ideally, it'd be identical, and therefore you could copy paste it. But anyway, I quite like it. It's quite simple and straightforward. Does the job nicely. Blocking's quite good. Anyway, there we go. So very nice. TRU trundles on. So really, it remains for me to ask some questions. Oh, views on Chris. Okay, so a few questions coming through. Views on Chris Gibbs' latest HS2 plan, Ironman trains. Well, that's one for the bonus, I think. Let's see, if they could reduce land values, they could at least help the housing market. That's for White Rose, yeah, quite. So, Price is Right, womp sound effects, as Mike said. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, Pineapple Man 3321, the graphs and everything that you've seen earlier. Oh, some of that is, I should say, let's get my large face up. Those graphs, those old Permanent Rail Engineering graphs are all on Twitter. They're all available. You can go and get hold of those. They're circulating. I can drop them into the, you can copy them out of the YouTube video, but also I can drop, people will find them go into the Discord and say, where's that thread from? But that thread is ancient. Arguably, it's that thread where I use some of those, or some of that storytelling that elevated me up to this, because it elevated my Twitter profile from nothing to something when I started explaining HS2 to everyone. Ruben Jelly is saying, I'm located on Exmoor with Tiverton Parkway miles away in the very, very long Heritage West Somerset Railway. Southwest Peninsula episode missed out Exmoor. Perhaps you had thoughts on West Somerset Railway. The reason it missed out on Exmoor is because there aren't any settlements of a size of 5,000 above. So it doesn't. So you've got all those small settlements that are best served by a good integrated frequent bus service. I think that's how I would specify. Standage Tunnel is a great narrowboating experience. Sue Weston, it absolutely is. Is that an advanced passenger train book above my right shoulder? Which is my right shoulder? This shoulder here. It's not an advanced passenger train book. It's an advanced passenger train unprinted destination sheet that someone sent me. A fan of the show sent me. There's a load of other APT paraphernalia. Go to the bonus episode. We can have a flick through it. Anyway, right. Okay. Time to... we've kept this one quite tight. It's been quite neat and tidy, this one. Look at that. Fab. It's always nice to have a bit of time to do a bit of Q&A. Yeah, okay, fine, right. But I am going to wrap this up actually nice and tight. Okay, so JT Metro 365. I think in episode 222 you said the Hope Valley line should be a Manchester Suburban Rail line and a Sheffield Suburban Rail line, both ending at Hope. How do you get between them? Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think... I varying thoughts on how you do those sorts of services, but I suppose you could do it that it goes one station either side, so there's overlap, or you just hop off and you hop onto the train go in the other direction, and they're so frequent that it doesn't matter. I think that is the way. That's the way I'd probably have done it in 222. 10,000 people live in Minehead though. Minehead is in Somerset, so I excluded it, didn't I? Because obviously Exmoor is half. Once you go past Pickery Pond, you're over into Somerset, aren't you? On that side, I drive over that. That's my favourite way over to North Devon, where my family is. So yeah, it's Somerset, so it's southwest, but it's not peninsular. That's why I kind of excluded it from the study area. Oh yeah. Right. Okay. Let's run things off. So before I close, a quick one to say, everyone subscribe, please. We need to get more subscribers so that we can have more people watching, so that we can have more subscribers, so that we can do more RailNat, to do more high-quality RailNat. I've been chugging in what I think is some high-quality episodes, I hope, that you've been enjoying. But it's an upfront commitment that requires subscribers and Patreon money, actually, to justify the time. So, do that. Thank you, everyone. Key thing I wanted to say, though, we were at 16,354. We're now at 16,535. So, we're getting there. On our way to 17,000. It's not a bad chunk we're making our way through. So we're getting there, folks. We're getting there. But thanks for those who do subscribe and pop on the notification. Pop your likes and comments as well, of course. It's nice to hear from you. I do reply to most comments and go through and have a read through. So all your comments get read through. Sometimes if you say something bigoted, it gets deleted. Bye. But most of you are absolutely lovely, and it's a delight to have you in the chat. And occasionally there's a pin of shame for us all to enjoy as well. So yeah. Anyway. There's also something to pay attention to in the credits as well. Hello, Jaden. Anyway, right, everyone. That's been a fairly tight episode, actually. Look at me paying close attention. Hopefully plenty in there for you to chew through. And join me at 21:30, in half an hour for the bonus. And otherwise, I'll see you next week. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio.